Hey friends, it's Nikayla from the podcast Side Hustle Pro. I'm always looking for ways to keep my kids entertained without screens, and the Yoto Mini has been a total lifesaver. My kids are obsessed. Yoto is a screen-free audio player where kids just pop in a card and listen. Hours of stories, music, podcasts, and more, and no screens or ads. With hundreds of options for ages 0 to 12, it's the perfect gift they'll go back to again and again. Check it out at yotoplay.com. yotoplay.com.
Parles-tu français?
¿Hablas español?
Parli italiano?
If you've used Babbel, you would. Babbel's conversation-based technique teaches you useful words and phrases to get you speaking quickly about the things you actually talk about in the real world. With lessons handcrafted by over 200 language experts and voiced by real native speakers, Babbel is like having a private tutor in your pocket. Start speaking with Babbel today. Get up to 55% off your Babbel subscription right now at babbel.com/acast. Spelled BABBEL.com/acast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Hey friends, it's Nikayla from the podcast Side Hustle Pro. I'm always looking for ways to keep my kids entertained without screens, and the Yoto Mini has been a total lifesaver. My kids are obsessed. Yoto is a screen-free audio player where kids just pop in a card and listen. Hours of stories, music, podcasts, and more, and no screens or ads. With hundreds of options for ages 0 to 12, it's the perfect gift they'll go back to again and again. Check it out at yotoplay.com. yotoplay.com.
Parles-tu français?
¿Hablas español?
Parli italiano?
If you've used Babbel, you would. Babbel's conversation-based technique teaches you useful words and phrases to get you speaking quickly about the things you actually talk about in the real world. With lessons handcrafted by over 200 language experts and voiced by real native speakers, Babbel is like having a private tutor in your pocket. Start speaking with Babbel today. Get up to 55% off your Babbel subscription right now at babbel.com/acast. Spelled BABBEL.com/acast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Night had fallen over the lava fields, and the only light came from the feeble beams of searchers' headlamps and the distant flicker of lightning on the horizon. A bitter wind hissed through the craggy basalt formations, carrying a chill that hinted at another frigid, high desert night to come. The terrain underfoot was treacherous, an otherworldly maze of sharp-edged rock and hidden holes. A park ranger paused, listening intently. In the darkness, the ancient lava seemed alive. Each gust of wind through a nearby lava tube made a low moan, as if the volcanic earth were whispering secrets. "Joe, Amy." Her voice was devoured by the emptiness. These two women had vanished into this desolation days ago. And as the storm clouds rolled overhead, the desperate search continued with a sense of urgency. Unbeknownst to the team tramping over the jagged ground, they were only a few hundred yards from a heartbreaking discovery. Moments later, a shout cut through the wind. A searcher had spotted something pale against the black basalt. The first sign of the fate of Joe Elliott-Blakeslee and Amy Linkert. I'm Sarah Powell, and this is Obscurata, because some stories have no ending. Just a week earlier, Dr. Jodine Jo Elliott-Blakeslee and her close friend Amelia Amy Linkert set out on what should have been a casual adventure. Jo was 63, a physician known for her work at the Snake River Correctional Institution in Ontario, Oregon. Amy was 69, a recently retired school teacher from Idaho, who had a passion for travel and had even done missionary work abroad. The pair were seasoned hikers and outdoor enthusiasts. Survivalists, Amy's family would later say, not the type to court unnecessary danger. In mid-September 2013, the two friends left Boise for a road trip to Craters of the Moon National Monument and Preserve, a vast expanse of volcanic wilderness in central Idaho. Amy had visited the monument once before and was excited to show Jo this strange, lunar-looking landscape of black lava flows and caves. They planned to be back by September 20th, in time for Amy's 70th birthday celebration that week. There was no hint that anything would go awry. These were careful, experienced women out for a short hiking excursion in a national monument. Craters of the Moon is a place that defies ordinary reality. Sprawling over 1,100 square miles, it's a rugged patchwork of hardened lava seas and sagebrush islands at nearly 6,000 feet elevation. Early explorers named it for its uncanny resemblance to a lunar landscape, and decades ago, Apollo astronauts even trained here, learning to navigate and collect rock samples in this harsh alien terrain. The local Shoshone people, however, had an older explanation. According to their legend, a giant serpent once coiled around a mountain here to sun itself. When a thunderstorm agitated the creature, it squeezed the mountain so fiercely that liquid fire burst from the earth. Lava flowed for days, burying the serpent in molten rock. The cooled lava fields today are said to be the charred remains of that mythic snake, with its ribs and bones forever imprinted in the black basalt. Standing in this vast expanse of jagged rock, you can easily feel the weight of such legends. By day, the sun bakes the dark lava, and the heat radiates in waves. By night, temperatures plunge below freezing, and the landscape becomes deathly still. There are no flowing streams or natural water sources in these lava fields. Only twisted dwarf shrubs and occasional hardy pines mark the sparse ground. And in many places, the terrain is a labyrinth of rock that can thwart even the most experienced hiker. Once you leave the trail, you cannot find your direction in the thick brush, unless you can climb up to see a peak. Amy's sister would later warn, describing the monument's unforgiving nature. It is easy to get lost here, and incredibly hard to be found. Jo and Amy arrived in the vicinity on September the 19th, 2013, and spent the night at a campground in the tiny town of Arco, about 18 miles from the monument. The next morning, they drove into Craters of the Moon and parked at the Tree Molds trailhead, a popular starting point for short hikes along the lava fields. They left their 2 dogs in the truck, along with their cell phones and other belongings, a clear sign that they intended a brief outing, nothing overnight or far-ranging. Park regulations forbid pets on the trails, so the plan was likely to take a quick hike and return to their dogs. Leaving behind their phones also suggested they did not expect any trouble, or perhaps they knew cellular reception was poor in the area and thought the phones useless on a short walk. To their family, this decision was puzzling and out of character. They're both avid hikers, survivalists. To have their phones in the truck, that's strange to us, Amy's niece Tammy Kirklow later said. But nothing else seemed amiss that morning. The sun rose on September the 19th with the promise of a beautiful autumn day, and the two friends set off walking, likely planning to be back within an hour or two. What happened next can only be reconstructed from scant evidence and the landscape's testimony. Sometime after leaving the trailhead, Joe and Amy left the trail itself. Why? No one knows for sure. Perhaps they wandered a short distance off the marked path to explore an interesting rock formation or to get a better view. Perhaps one of them needed a bathroom break behind some bushes. It might even have been an attempt to take a shortcut back to the car that went horribly wrong. The Tree Moulds area is known for its rugged off-trail terrain, a mix of jagged lava outcrops and pockets of dense sagebrush. Step beyond the maintained cinder path, and within minutes, the landscape can swallow you. The black volcanic rock underfoot is uneven and abrasive. One wrong step can send a hiker sprawling with cut hands or a twisted ankle. Worse, the terrain is deceptively uniform. Once off the trail, every direction can look the same. As Amy's sister noted, without a vantage point, it's nearly impossible to reorient yourself in the thick brush and lava ridges. Joe and Amy would have quickly lost sight of the car and the trail. Their footprints on solid rock would vanish almost immediately. In such a maze, even a few hundred yards off course can trap hikers in a loop of confusion. Sometime that day, a sudden change in weather rolled across the Snake River plain. The region is famous for its capricious weather. Even in late summer or early autumn, a sunny morning can give way to fierce winds, rain, or even snow flurries without warning. That week, an early storm system struck the monument with driving rain and gusting winds. The sky darkened, and cold rain pelted the black lava landscape, making the rocks slick. Lightning forked in the distance over the mountains. To anyone caught out on the exposed lava fields, it would have been a terrifying turn of events. With no shelter and the volcanic rock acting like a giant heat sink, temperatures would have dropped rapidly. It's easy to imagine Joe and Amy at that moment, two dots in a vast open land, drenched and alarmed as the pleasant day turned violent. Perhaps they tried to hurry back the way they came, only to realise they were disorientated amid the lava cones and dead-end ravines. The Tree Moulds Trail itself is relatively short, a 1-mile loop, but off of it lie miles of unmarked wilderness. In a sudden storm, the women could have panicked and strayed further from the trail, seeking a shortcut or any sign of the road. It's also possible one of them slipped on the wet rock and got hurt, a twisted ankle or broken bone, forcing them to make hard choices. The official investigators later considered that scenario. Maybe Jo was injured, and Amy chose to leave her to go find help. For several days, no one realised the two women were missing. They had told family and co-workers they'd return by the 20th or so. But when that day passed, it didn't immediately raise alarms. They were on holiday, possibly with flexible plans. It wasn't until Tuesday, September the 24th, that concern escalated. Jo failed to show up at work that day, and her colleagues knew something was wrong. Both women were responsible and punctual by nature. Worried calls were made, and none were answered. By that afternoon, Jo and Amy were officially reported missing. Authorities checked around and discovered the last confirmed sighting had been 5 days earlier, on September the 19th, at the Arco campground. With that information, the Butte County Sheriff's Office and National Park Service Rangers mobilised a search of craters of the moon, focusing on the Tree Mold Trail area, where the women's vehicle would soon be found. Rangers quickly located Jo's silver pickup truck at the parking lot inside the monument. The truck was still sitting there, locked. Inside were the two dogs, alive but hungry and thirsty. They had been waiting anxiously for their owners for days. Also in the vehicle were the women's cell phones, purses, and camping gear. That sight made the searchers' hearts sink. No hikers planning an extended trek would ever leave behind all their supplies and their beloved pets. Jo and Amy clearly must have intended only a brief outing, yet something had gone very wrong. The search effort commenced immediately, but fate dealt the rescuers a cruel twist. The same day the women were reported missing, the US federal government was on the brink of a shutdown due to a budget impasse. On October the 1st, just as wider search resources were ramping up, federal funding for the National Park Service stalled. Many park staff were furloughed, and specialised resources, helicopters, extra personnel from other parks and so on, were suddenly in limbo. For a moment it looked as if the search might be forced to scale back right when it was most critical. Thankfully, the people of Craters of the Moon refused to abandon the effort. Despite the shutdown, a core team of park staff kept the search going. Helicopters and other resources were limited, working alongside a skeleton crew of local deputies and volunteers. These dedicated searchers, like Ted Stout, the park's chief interpreter, who was furloughed but couldn't bear to quit looking, vowed to continue scouring the desert on their own time if need be. "We can't let her down now. This needs to continue," Stout said of the ongoing mission to find Jo. Over the coming days, an army of volunteers and personnel from across Idaho converged on the monument. At the height of the search, up to 100 people were combing the lava fields. On foot, through ankle-shredding terrain, with canine teams sniffing the air, and by air with every helicopter flight they could manage to keep fueled. In total, thousands of man-hours went into the effort. The search radius expanded out from the Tree Mold Trail into a roughly 5-square-mile grid of unforgiving wilderness. They explored lava cracks and depressions, hid under rock ledges, and even enlisted caving experts to examine the numerous lava tube caves in the area. in case the women had crawled into one for shelter. Each night, the teams would regroup exhausted, eyes raw from scanning the sea of black rock for any hint of colour or movement. On the afternoon of September the 25th, a day after the search began in earnest, one search party made a grim discovery. Lying face up on a rough stretch of lava, about 1.5 miles west of the Tree Mold Trail, they found the body of a woman. She wore only hiking pants and a short-sleeved shirt, with no jacket or coat despite the chilly weather. There was no backpack, no water, no food, no supplies of any kind on her person. It appeared she had not been carrying anything when she died. The body showed no obvious signs of traumatic injury from an animal or a fall. It looked as if she had simply laid down on the rock, gazing up at the sky, and never gotten up. Initially, the recovery team assumed it must be Dr. Joe. The age and build seemed closer to the younger of the two women, and they found no identification. But shortly thereafter, dental records proved the worst. The deceased was 69-year-old Amelia Amy Linkert. Amy had perished in the wilderness she loved, likely succumbing to a combination of dehydration and exposure to the elements. The county coroner would later conclude she'd been dead for a few days before being found. In other words, Amy might have survived several agonizing nights after getting lost, enduring freezing temperatures and thirst before her body gave out. The evidence at the scene suggested Amy had grown disorientated and was desperately searching for help at the end. Investigators noted that she seemed to have shed layers, possibly due to hypothermia-induced confusion, and wondered until she collapsed from exhaustion. There was absolutely no indication of foul play. Everything pointed to a tragic death by natural forces in a harsh environment. The discovery of Amy's body brought both heartache and a renewed resolve to find Joe. At least now, searchers could narrow the focus. Joe was still missing somewhere out there, presumably still alive in those first days after Amy was found, or so everyone desperately hoped. Family and friends clung to the possibility that Joe, the younger and by all accounts very fit member of the pair, might have beaten the odds and found shelter in a cave or depression, waiting for rescue. Some thought Joe might have been injured and unable to travel far. Others imagined she could have wandered beyond the initial search zone. The search teams redoubled their efforts, scouring outward from Amy's location. They marked a rough line between the spot where Amy lay and the parked truck, reasoning that Joe might be found along that path if the two had separated during their attempt to find the car or get help. Day after day, teams trekked over the lava fields. A helicopter passed low over the jumbled landscape whenever possible. Spotters peered for any sign of human life, but Craters of the Moon was not about to give up its second missing woman easily. Weeks passed with no sign of Joe. The early autumn weather remained mercurial. Some days were deceptively warm under clear skies. On others, bitter winds would howl and a skim of frost would lace the rocks each morning. The government shutdown dragged on for the first half of October, hampering the full deployment of resources. Yet the core search continued thanks to volunteers and those rangers who refused to leave their posts. Hope began to wane as nights grew longer and colder. Joe's family arrived in Idaho to assist and to plead with any hikers or hunters in the region. Please keep an eye out for anything unusual. By mid-October, nearly a month had elapsed. Could Joe possibly have survived somewhere in that high desert without water, injured or not? It seemed inconceivable. And yet, without finding her body, the searchers could not rest. This area was too vast and full of nooks, lava tubes, craters, crevices, where a person could remain hidden. In a last push, as soon as the federal budget impasse was resolved and normal operations resumed around October the 16th, search managers scaled back up the aerial surveys and brought in additional support. They were determined to bring Joe home, one way or another. Finally, on the evening of October the 22nd, 2013, there was a breakthrough. A National Park Service helicopter, flying low over a particularly rough patch of lava, about a mile west of Amy's last location, caught a glimpse of something out of place. Against the endless black basalt, the pilot and park ranger aboard spotted a flash of colour, the telltale sign of human clothing. They circled and confirmed what ground teams had missed dozens of times before. A body lying in a craggy depression, partially shielded by a rock overhang. It was Dr. Joe Elliott-Blakeslee. She was about 2.5 miles from the trailhead where the truck had been, roughly a mile beyond where Amy was found, meaning the two friends had separated at some point in their ordeal. In retrospect, it made sense why Joe's remains had gone undetected for so long. The lava field where she lay was convoluted and dark. From the air, a person could blend into the basalt unless conditions were just right. One searcher noted that Joe's body was invisible to helicopters during previous flights. It's very likely Joe sheltered there, using the rock to hide from the sun or wind, and in doing so, inadvertently concealed herself from rescuers overhead. The terrain had literally camouflaged her. When the sad news was radioed in, the search team and family members felt a complex rush of relief and sorrow. The month-long hunt was over. Both women had been found, and neither had survived. The official cause of death for Joe was ultimately ruled the same as Amy's: exposure likely combined with dehydration. In those wild lava fields, with no water and freezing night temperatures, a healthy person can succumb in just a couple of days. Joe, like Amy, had no signs of trauma. It appeared she had simply lain down and never gotten up. Perhaps after Amy left to find help, Joe herself wandered further, delirious and weak, until she could go no further. The exact sequence of events that led to the two women ending up a mile apart will never be known for certain. Investigators theorized that one of them might indeed have been hurt early on. Maybe Joe sprained an ankle or fell, and Amy decided to venture ahead to get assistance. They might have agreed Amy would return with rescuers, which could explain why Joe stayed put under shelter while Amy kept moving until she collapsed. Another possibility is that as the storm raged and night fell on that first day, the friends became separated by accident, losing sight of each other in the rain and darkness on the featureless lava plain. Whichever the case, both women faced their end utterly alone in an ocean of black rock. There was no grand mystery for law enforcement to solve, no evidence of foul play, and no indications that anything other than misfortune and nature's wrath were responsible. But that didn't stop the public from speculating and ascribing a mystery to the tragedy. To those who knew Joe and Amy, the simplest explanation made the most sense. They took what they thought was a short, safe hike and were overcome by the lethal environment. Honestly, this looks like a very sad but normal occurrence, one commenter noted, pointing out how easy it is to get turned around in that terrain when weather hits. Family members, while grief-stricken, voiced that they didn't suspect anything unusual beyond an accident. The local sheriff and park officials concurred. There was no sign of any human threat, and all clues fit the narrative of disorientation and exposure. And yet, there are certainly some puzzling details to the case. Why did these two experienced hikers leave the trail in the first place, especially knowing their dogs, whom they doted on, were waiting in the car? Why would they wander so far from the parking area without any gear or water, when they were typically cautious women? And how did Joe remain missing for 28 days in an area extensively searched by helicopters and dogs? Seasoned searchers swear they had overflown that exact spot numerous times. The eventual answer, that her body was hidden by the rock's natural contours, is logical, but has not stopped some from wondering if she might have still been alive and moving for some time after Amy's death. There was even talk in paranormal-themed forums tying Joe and Amy's story to the so-called missing 411 phenomenon, a catalogue of strange disappearances in US national parks that share patterns difficult to explain. Some speculated about what might live beneath the surface of craters of the moon, in the miles of unexplored lava tubes that lace the ground like veins. Others wondered whether something ancient, something that predates us, watches from the vents and fissures when night falls. No one ever found proof of anything unnatural. Every official report points to exposure, exhaustion, and the brutal indifference of the land. And yet, those who have walked that blackened wilderness at dusk, where the wind moans through the caves and shadows move in ways they shouldn't, sometimes come away feeling that the women weren't entirely alone out there. Craters of the Moon remains both beautiful and perilous, a place that still swallows sound, light, and sometimes people. As one of Amy's grieving sisters said, "It's real life. It's not a TV show." But for those who stand in that silence, it's hard not to wonder if real life, in places like this, is sometimes stranger than anything on screen.
Hey friends, it's Nikayla from the podcast Side Hustle Pro. I'm always looking for ways to keep my kids entertained without screens, and the Yoto Mini has been a total lifesaver. My kids are obsessed. Yoto is a screen-free audio player where kids just pop in a card and listen. Hours of stories, music, podcasts, and more, and no screens or ads. With hundreds of options for ages 0 to 12, it's the perfect gift they'll go back to again and again. Check it out at yotoplay.com, YOTOPLAY.com. YOTOPLAY.com.
Parles-tu français?
¿Hablas español?
Parli italiano?
If you've used Babbel, you would. Babbel's conversation-based technique teaches you useful words and phrases to get you speaking quickly about the things you actually talk about in the real world. With lessons handcrafted by over 200 language experts and voiced by real native speakers, Babbel is like having a private tutor in your pocket. Start speaking with Babbel today. Get up to 55% off your Babbel subscription right now at babbel.com/acast. Spelled BABBEL.com/acast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
In the end, the story of Joe Elliott-Blakeslee and Amy Linkert is a sobering testament to how even a routine outing can spiral into catastrophe under the right conditions. Two intelligent, well-prepared women ventured into a park on a pleasant day. Within hours, they were hopelessly lost in a volcanic wilderness that cares nothing for human confidence. They faced howling winds, freezing nights, and an endless expanse of rock that offers no sustenance and little mercy. And that's the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed. If you'd like to support this podcast, you can do so by visiting patreon.com/The Whispering Woods, clicking on Obscurata, and for £2.50 a month, you can listen ad-free. You can also subscribe to the Banshee tier, where you can listen to this podcast and our other podcast, The Whispering Woods, ad-free, and that is £4.50 a month. We are also on Apple Premium, where for $4.99 a month you can listen ad-free to both podcasts. I want to say a quick thank you to Rog for fact-checking and editing. And as always, stay curious and sleep with the lights on, just in case.
Hey friends, it's Nikayla from the podcast Side Hustle Pro. I'm always looking for ways to keep my kids entertained without screens, and the Yoto Mini has been a total lifesaver. My kids are obsessed. Yoto is a screen-free audio player where kids just pop in a card and listen. Hours of stories, music, podcasts, and more, and no screens or ads. With hundreds of options for ages 0 to 12, it's the perfect gift they'll go back to again and again. Check it out at yotoplay.com. YOTOPLAY.com.
Parles-tu français?
¿Hablas español?
Parli italiano?
If you've used Babbel, you would. Babbel's conversation-based technique teaches you useful words and phrases to get you speaking quickly about the things you actually talk about in the real world. With lessons handcrafted by over 200 language experts and voiced by real native speakers, Babbel is like having a private tutor in your pocket. Start speaking with Babbel today. Get up to 55% off your Babbel subscription right now at babbel.com/acast. Spelled BABBEL.com/acast. Rules and restrictions may apply.